If you're a Salesforce developer, you know the feeling, right? A deployment fails. Again, someone accidentally overwrites your work, and you're not even 100% sure what's really in the production org anymore. It's just chaos. Well, today, we're going to talk about how to get from that chaos to a state of clarity by mastering a modern, source-driven package development model.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start by untangling that big monolithic org. Then we'll talk about the new source of truth and the modern tools you're going to need. After that, we'll clear up the whole scratch orgs versus sandboxes debate, walk through the new development lifecycle, and finally, help you figure out how to plan your very first package. All right, let's jump in. First up, let's get right to the heart of the problem we're all trying to solve. We need to untangle the org and really understand why the traditional way of building on Salesforce is holding so many of us back. So let me ask you this. Is your Salesforce org a happy soup of metadata? You know what I mean. It's that thing that happens when all your code, your objects, your customizations, they're all just mixed together in one giant, inseparable blob. And if that happy soup idea sounds a little too familiar, then I'm betting these frustrations do too. You've got the constant deployment failures, the classic, oops, I just overwrote your changes, and just how ridiculously hard it is to coordinate work when you have multiple teams. You know, the real problem is that when everything's tangled up, one tiny change over here can cause a total disaster over there. So, the solution is a pretty fundamental shift in how we think. We're moving away from the old way, that monolithic, happy soup, to a new way, modular packages. I want you to think of it like this. We're going from a big bowl of tangled noodles to a neat set of Lego building blocks that you can organize, reuse, and snap together. That's really the end goal here. So how do we actually get there? Well, it all comes down to a huge change in where we think the truth actually lives. We have to move from a model that's org-driven to one that is completely source-driven. Okay, this right here, this is the absolute heart of the whole new model. In source-driven development, your version control system, we're talking about Git, GitHub, that kind of thing, becomes the single authoritative source of truth. The Salesforce orgs you're working in, they're just temporary copies. They're just reflections of what's in your code. It's no longer the other way around. And trust me, this completely changes the game for tracking changes and making your deployments predictable. So what's the magic ingredient that makes all this practical for you and your internal teams? Well, the answer is unlocked packages. See, for a long time, packages were mainly for app exchange partners, but unlocked packages, they were built from the ground up specifically for enterprise teams like yours. And this table really shows you why they're the sweet spot. You've got managed packages over here, which are great because they're upgradable, but they lock down your code. Then you have unmanaged packages where the code is editable, but you can't really upgrade them. But unlocked packages, they're in that last column, they give you the best of both worlds. They're upgradable, the code is totally editable, and you don't even need a namespace. They are perfectly designed for this flexible, source-driven world. Now, to make all this actually work, you're going to need a modern toolkit. So let's take a look at the essential tools that really power this new workflow. This whole new way of working is really built on 4 main pillars. First, you've got the Salesforce CLI, which lets you automate pretty much everything from the command line. Second, you need a good IDE like VS Code, which is going to be your main workbench. Third, a version control system like Git. This is absolutely non-negotiable. It's your source of truth. And finally, the Dev Hub. This is a feature you just turn on in your production org, and it acts as the master controller for creating and managing all your Scratch orgs and packages. All right, let's tackle one of the biggest points of confusion when teams start making this switch. What is the real difference between a Scratch org and a sandbox, and when do you use each one? Okay, a Scratch org is your personal, disposable, little development world. The keywords to remember here are temporary and source-driven. You spin one up from your source code in just a few minutes, you do the work for one specific feature, and then you throw it away. You never, ever get attached to a Scratch org. A sandbox, on the other hand, is a persistent copy of your production org. It's meant to stick around for weeks, maybe even months. Its job isn't for your day-to-day coding. No, its job is for the bigger stuff, like integration testing, user acceptance testing, and staging your final release. It's supposed to be a stable environment that looks just like production. This table just nails the difference perfectly. Look at the purpose. Scratch orgs are for active development and automated tests. Sandboxes are for that final testing and staging. And the lifespan? We're talking days versus months or even years. But most importantly, check out the source of truth. A Scratch org is built from your code in Git, A sandbox is a copy of your production org. Getting this distinction right is absolutely critical to your success. So, we've got the concepts, we've got the tools, and we understand the environments. Let's move on and see how this all comes together to form a brand new, much cleaner development lifecycle. So here's the entire journey of a single feature, from idea to production. It all starts with a developer, working in their own little temporary Scratch org. When they're done, they commit their code to version control. That automatically kicks off an integration test in a brand new Scratch org. If everything passes, a new, versioned, unlocked package gets created. That package is then installed into a sandbox for UAT, and finally, once it's approved, that package gets released to production. You see, every single step is automated, it's trackable, and it's reliable. Now, I know that can feel like a really big change, but you don't have to boil the ocean here. The key is to start small. So let's talk about how you can actually plan your very first package and get started on this journey. You've got to remember the old saying, right? Rome wasn't built in a day. The exact same thing is true here. If you've got a big, complex org, this shift to packages has to happen over time. You got to plan your transition thoughtfully and just move one piece at a time. So what are those first steps? Well, first, get the right people in the room. Then, start looking for a good candidate for your very first package. You're looking for a distinct, self-contained piece of functionality. If you find components that are shared everywhere, maybe those belong in a common base package. But honestly, the most important piece of advice is just to start. Pick one thing, create your first package, and just learn the process. And that really brings us to the key question. The goal here isn't just to understand the theory, it's to actually apply it. So I want you to take a hard look at your own happy soup and ask yourself this one simple question. What part of your org will you package first?